Good morning. I'm Mitch Mitchell, Chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. It is 9:02 a.m. on November 17th, 2022, and I'm calling to order the special meeting of the board. The process we're using for today's meeting is authorized by Government Code Section 54953E, which was added by Assembly Bill 361. This allows the Housing Commission to use teleconferencing and to provide the public with an opportunity to address the board through a call-in or internet-based option during a proclaimed state of emergency. The San Diego City Council on November 1st, 2022, and again on Tuesday of this week, November 15th, declared that a state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of members to meet safely in person. The council also declared that this applies to all boards, commissions, and committees of the city of San Diego. Today's special meeting is occurring by video conference with all board members, our interim president and CEO, housing commission staff, and general counsel participating by video. For the record, I will ask each board member to indicate your presence as I say your name. Vice Chair Ryan Klempner.
Here.
Good morning. Commissioner Steffi Benvenuto.
Good morning.
Commissioner Joanna Hester.
Present.
And Commissioner Kelly Hubbard. Commissioner Hubbard has not joined us yet. They let the record show when she joins. Commissioner Vasquez is not going to be able to be with us this morning, and we will hopefully see her at the next meeting. No members of the public are in attendance. However, members of the public may watch the video conference and hear the audio of today's meeting, which is being streamed live online. The agenda for today's meeting included a link to the website for the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners, where the public can access the live streaming for today's meeting. The public has been provided with an alternative opportunity to provide comments to the board through an online comment form and a toll-free phone number. A link to the online comment form was included on the agenda for today's special meeting, which was posted on the San Diego Housing Commission. That website is www.sdhc.org, and it was posted on November 10th. The agenda and the public comment form explain that comments about items on the agenda will be read into the record if they were submitted by 4 p.m. yesterday, November 16th. Non-agenda public comments submitted by 8 o'clock this morning will also be read into the record. In addition, members of the public who wish to listen to today's meeting by phone and speak on an item may call the toll-free number that is included on the agenda, and that number is 833-548-0276 when prompted. The caller should enter the meeting ID number provided on the agenda, which is 960-6912-6650. A participant ID number is not required, just press pound. Members of the public will remain muted until they are called upon to speak. When the comment period for non-agenda public comment or an agenda item is introduced, those who wish to speak should press *9 on their phone to raise their hand. Staff will then inform callers when it is their turn to speak. When that occurs, the caller will need to press *6 to unmute themselves. If a caller begins to comment on an item that is different from the item currently being considered, they will be muted and asked to raise their hand at the correct time when that item is being discussed. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to provide their comments. However, if a large number of callers wishes to speak on a single agenda item, comments will be limited to 1 minute each. Members of the public may also watch video of today's meeting through the live video streaming available through the Housing Commission website, which once again is www.sdhc.org. Today's agenda included a link to the website for this board, where the public can access live streaming for today's meeting. Now, we will proceed to the non-agenda public comments. And as I mentioned, the phone line for today's meeting is 833-548-0276. Callers, if you wish to provide a non-agenda public comment, please dial now and press *9 to raise your hand. This is the time when members of the public may provide comments to the Housing Commission's board about the topics that are not on today's agenda, but involve a subject within the Housing Commission's area of responsibility. The Housing Commission cannot take action on non-agenda public comments. We did not receive any written non-agenda public comments for today's meeting, and I will now ask our Vice President of Communications, Scott Marshall. Scott, do we have any callers for the non-agenda public comment?
We do not have any hands raised for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the non-agenda public comment portion of our agenda. Now, commissioners, I would ask you if you would like to make any comments prior to moving on with the agenda. Seeing none, the floor will now move to our interim president and CEO, Jeff Davis. The next item is for you. Please begin your report.
Thank you. And I might just note, Chair, that Commissioner Hubbard has joined us.
Good morning, Commissioner Hubbard. It is a pleasure to have you joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Just in time for the report from Jeff Davis.
So I do have a few updates to share with you all this morning. On November 7th, Mayor Todd Gloria and County Board of Supervisor Chair Nathan Fletcher held a roundtable discussion about veterans experiencing homelessness. Policymakers and veterans with lived experience in homelessness participated. And one of the important takeaways from the discussion was the challenge of making sure that veterans know about the available assistance. Assistance includes a variety of resources through the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs healthcare system and service providers, as well as housing assistance from the Housing Commission. Housing Commission programs receive referrals from the VA and supportive services for veteran family program service providers. We work closely with community-based organizations and service providers to make Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing, or VASH, vouchers, our Landlord Engagement and Assistance Program, or LEAP, and other housing assistance available for veterans. These close working relationships help the Regional Task Force for the Homeless get the word out and connect veterans to these programs. Also, our staff participate in weekly veteran case conferencing sessions with the VA, and we're also working with the VA to create a flyer with information about veteran resources at the Homelessness Response Center. And this flyer will be posted at locations that provide basic services such as the day center, food banks, et cetera, to help raise awareness of veteran programs. Housing Commission will also continue to work with the VA and service providers on outreach and referrals for programs. And some good news to share with you, we were notified on November 4th that we received 25 additional VASH vouchers, and that brings our VASH total to more than 1,300 vouchers. The Housing Commission has entered into a new partnership with the San Diego Futures Foundation that supports our digital equity and inclusion efforts. We will be donating the Housing Commission's retired computers, laptops, and Surface equipment to the San Diego Futures Foundation. And through our contract with the foundation, 60% of the equipment that we donate will be made available at no cost to Housing Commission clients and the residents of public housing that the Housing Commission operates. Our initial donation will consist of approximately 100 devices. The Housing Commission's Achievement Academy will manage this program. And I want to take the time to recognize and acknowledge Jeff Bartell, our Vice President of Information Technology, for his contribution in developing this idea for this partnership and in helping to coordinate with the Achievement Academy and the Futures Foundation. Thank you, Jeff. On Monday of this week, the Housing Commission participated in the grand opening of 2 adjoining developments that provide more than 190 affordable rental apartments for families and seniors. Mid-City Family Apartments and Harris Family Senior Residence were developed by Chelsea Investment Corporation with financing from the Housing Commission. Our Senior Vice President of Housing Finance and Property Management, Colin Miller, joined California State Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins, Mayor Todd Gloria, and City Council President Sean Elo Rivera, along with additional development partners at that event. The Housing Commission's multimedia fiscal year 2022 annual report was published November 3rd on our website. The report highlights the stories of some of the thousands of San Diegans that the Housing Commission assisted through the fiscal year. It also includes data, graphics, and descriptions of our many programs. And I encourage you, I ask that you please take some time to look through this report. Scott and his team have created a report that really a Fortune 500 company would be proud of, and we're very proud of, and I hope you'll take a good look at it. The Housing Commission is also expanding our communication and public outreach efforts into social media, beginning with our LinkedIn account. We launched with a post about the annual report on November 3rd. We are continuing to develop plans to engage on other social media platforms as soon as possible. And Chair Mitchell's guidance and support have been essential to our progress in the area of social media, and we thank you for your leadership there. I want to acknowledge our Financial Services Department for recognition that they've received now for the 14th consecutive year. The Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada awarded its highest recognition to the Housing Commission for our annual financial report for fiscal year 2021. Congratulations to the finance team and keep up the great work. And lastly, later in today's presentation, you'll be receiving a workshop on homelessness prevention. Through our Housing for San Diego Action Plan, the Housing Commission has taken the lead on prevention work in our region for several years. With high rent costs, low vacancy rates, and the need for homelessness response continuing to outweigh the available resources, it's more important than ever that we discuss prevention. Today's workshop will walk through our existing efforts to prevent families from experiencing homelessness in the first place, and we'll look at the different stages of prevention and how we can work with regional stakeholders to leverage resources and continue to find opportunities to scale regional prevention efforts. And I look forward to this important discussion with you. That concludes my report today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate your report. And I will make a couple of comments. I do believe that today's workshop on prevention is vital. And for everybody watching or listening to the commission hearing, we have a lot of work to do. And I'm pleased with the staff's progress on communication. We have to be great communicators during this important time where the homelessness crisis is growing, and it will take a great collaborative to really address it. And so I appreciate everything that you and the team are doing, because I know we're doing a lot of things that are new, but we're doing it with great enthusiasm because we understand the importance of this effort for so many people who are dealing with homelessness or worried about homelessness and evictions. And so kudos to you and the entire team. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the Housing Commission Board's special meeting of October 13th, 2022. Members of the public who wish to comment on the minutes should press *9 to raise their hand. I don't believe that any written public comments were submitted regarding the minutes. Scott Marshall, do we have any callers at this time on this item?
We do not have any callers regarding the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the public comment period for the minutes. Do any of the commissioners wish to make any changes or note any nuances to the minutes? Or if not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I have a question, Chair. The minutes regarding the copy of the agreement being sent to the commissioners, has that been done? Because I haven't seen it particular to the, sorry, let me pull it up.
This is the agreement on, was it one of the, on the,
Sorry, looking. This is the minutes. I think this is the, oh. Sorry, I noted it and then I left the copy of the minutes. So it is the lease approval for the Latinos y Latinas en Acción.
yeah, I remember we approved it at the last meeting, and it was in the, I think because it was on the last agenda, I believe that was all the details were in the presentation that was in the last board meeting agenda.
And that's where I'll find it. Thank you.
You should find it there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any further comments or questions?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion by Commissioner Benvenuto,
Second.
second by Vice Chair Klumpner. All right. We have a motion and a second. For the record, I will ask each commissioner to say your vote on the motion when I state your name. Vice Chair Klumpner,
Aye.
Commissioner Benvenuto,
Aye.
Commissioner Hester, Commissioner Hester.
Aye.
And Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right. All the commissioners have voted in favor of the motion and none are opposed. I will add my vote in favor, and that means the motion now carries 5-0. Now we will move on to the consent agenda this morning. I am proposing that items 100, 101, and 102 be approved on the consent agenda. Item 100 is the 2023 Housing Commission Board meeting schedule. Item 101 is the award of the plumbing maintenance and repair services contract. And item 102 is the fiscal year 2022 annual comprehensive financial report and single audit report, which was presented to the board's audit committee on November 2nd. Members of the public who wish to speak on any of these items, 100, 101, or 102, should press *9 to raise your hand. I don't believe that any written public comments were submitted regarding the three items, but I will ask Scott Marshall, do we have any callers at this time for any of these three items?
We do not have any callers for these items. Thank you.
Okay, then that concludes the public comment period for items 100, 101, and 102. Commissioners, do you have any additional comments on these items, or do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
So moved by.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Commissioner Hester, a second by, I believe, Commissioner Hubbard.
Correct.
Yes, all right. With that, that motion, I will now, for the record, I will ask each commissioner to say your vote on the motion when I state your name. Vice Chair Klumpner,
Aye.
Commissioner Benvenuto,
Aye.
Commissioner Hester,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye.
Yeah, wonderful. All commissioners have voted in favor of the motion and none are opposed. I will add my vote in favor of the motion, which carries 5-0, and the consent agenda item has now been approved. We will now proceed with the remaining items on today's agenda. The PowerPoint presentations were emailed to each of the commissioners yesterday, November 16th, and are posted on the Housing Commission's website. We will begin with item 103, which is the Preliminary Bond Authorization and Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, or TEFRA hearing for the Rancho Bernardo Transit Village. The TEFRA hearing is now open. Members of the public who wish to speak on this item should press star 9 on their phones to raise their hand. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. No written public comments were submitted regarding this item. And Vice President of Multifamily Housing Finance, Jennifer Kreuter, will be presenting this item. Jennifer, please begin when you are prepared.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Mitchell and Commissioners. The item before you today is a request to take the initial steps to issue tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and hold a TEFRA hearing to facilitate the new construction of Rancho Bernardo Transit Village. Next slide. Rancho Bernardo Transit Village is the proposed construction of a 100-unit project, which is made up of 99 affordable units and 1 unrestricted manager's unit. The project is located at 16785 to 16787 West Rancho Bernardo Drive in the Rancho Bernardo Community Plan Area in Council District 5. The proposed project's 99 affordable units be 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. All units be for households with income levels from 30 to 60% of area median income for 55 years. This equates to income levels from $31,250 per year to $62,460 per year for a 2-person household. Site amenities will include on-site supportive services, a children's play area, a community room, shaded outdoor gathering spaces with built-in seating, and a leasing office. A portion of the site is the bus station, the Rancho Bernardo Transit Station. Next slide, please. The developer, Affirmed Housing Group, is an experienced award-winning developer. The proposed development received an award of 30 federal project-based housing vouchers through the Housing Commission's fiscal year 2022 Notice of Funding Availability. These vouchers will be for individuals with very low income but are not experiencing homelessness. Services for the tenants will be provided by Compass for Affordable Housing. Next slide, please. This slide shows the site map of the development. It is located just west of Interstate 15 at 16785 to 16787 West Rancho Bernardo Drive in the Rancho Bernardo Community Plan Area in Council District 5. Next slide, please. The total development cost of the project will be approximately $75 million, which equates to a per unit cost of about $750,000. Notable sources of funding include a permanent loan, loans from the City of San Diego and County of San Diego, deferred developer fee, and tax credits. There are no Housing Commission loans for this property. Next slide, please. Several factors affect the cost of developing affordable housing. The high cost per unit for this development is attributable to the items shown on this slide. Construction costs have significantly increased over the prior year. They are estimated to be approximately 14% higher than prior year. Additionally, through the developer's design review process with the City of San Diego and a water study that had been submitted to the city determined that a water loop is required rather than an upgrade of an existing system. It was also determined that approximately 550 feet of additional sewer is required for the property. Rising interest rates are also contributing to the higher costs. At the beginning of the calendar year, interest rates were in the 3 to 4% range, and now they are over 7%. In 10 short months, interest rates increased approximately 4%. Another factor is the developer's construction of 85 Metropolitan Transit System replacement parking stalls as part of this project. This is an investment for the community as the parking will be available for all patrons at the Rancho Bernardo Transit Station. Finally, the site will include 14,500 square feet of commercial office space. Please note that the tax exempt bonds proposed for approval today will not cover the cost of the commercial office space. When this space is removed from the project's total development cost, the cost per unit is $695,000. Next slide, please. Units will be restricted at 30 to 60% of area median income for 55 years. Rents will range from $732 to $2,030 per month. As shown in this slide, the developer is proposing a range of AMI levels across all units, regardless of its size. Next slide, please. If the proposed actions are approved today, the developer will apply to the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee for a bond allocation in early 2023. If the developer receives an award of bonds, we anticipate bringing this item back for final bond-related actions in fall 2023. At that time, in addition to the Housing Commission Board, the project will also be presented to the Housing Authority for approval. The developer expects to close construction financing and begin construction in late 2023 and complete construction in 2024. Next slide, please. Here's an architect's rendering of the proposed project. Next slide, please. You're considering actions to take the preliminary steps to issue up to $42.5 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and $21 million in taxable bonds. Approval of the Bond Issuance and Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, TEFRA, resolutions does not commit the Housing Authority to issue bonds. The bonds would not constitute a debt of the city. If bonds are ultimately issued for the project, the bonds will not financially obligate the city, the Housing Authority, or the Housing Commission, because security for the repayment of the bonds will be limited to specific private revenue sources. Staff recommends that the board take the actions in the staff report and shown on the following slides. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. This concludes the presentation. Representatives from the developer and I are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good, great job. We will now ask whether or not we have any public comments from callers on this item. Scott Marshall.
We do not have any callers on this item. It looks like Vice Chair Klempner's hand is raised.
This concludes the public comment period for item 103. Commissioners, this is now your opportunity for questions, and Vice Chair Klempner, you are first out of the gate. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the breakdown on the cost per unit and how we're all very aware that costs are going up with everything, and it's the reality of what we're dealing with. And I appreciate staff sort of keeping on top of how that is leading into what we're looking at here. I do have a few questions related to the 85 parking stalls for the public, and can you elaborate on why that's a requirement, the background on that?
So the ground lease that is entered into with MTS, it actually requires that they replace 85 of the stalls. And on top of that, when Affirmed went to the community plan group for a presentation, one of the things that they wanted was to make sure that there's still parking available. And so this was also to help with the community's issue or concerns with the project. So.
Got it. Okay, I mean that makes sense, so this is a matter of the ground lease for this specific spot, since we're dealing with MTS property here. Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I totally understand the need to have parking near transit in those areas. I guess the part that I was trying to wrap my head around is my general thought on parking would be that affordable housing is not necessarily the appropriate party to be paying for that type of a community benefit in general. But I guess since we're dealing with the specific circumstances here, I understand how we're ending up on that. I guess I would just sort of say for the public and other agencies, the community benefit of affordable housing in my mind is the affordable housing, and especially when we're dealing with public resources being used to create these things. basically, I think what I'm saying is if there was any other way to get that parking there that didn't involve attaching it to affordable housing for not, and again, this is not for the residents, right? This is for other people. So that's kind of my only concern, but I certainly understand why MTS needs the parking there and why that was a condition in this case. I just, would like to kind of say to Rancho Bernardo and everybody else that, affordable housing doesn't need to be providing additional community benefits. It is a community benefit. And so I hope we all kind of think of it that way.
I will say too, that there are, I believe it's 78 parking stalls that will be for the residents as well. So this will be on top of those stalls that are already for the actual affordable housing residents.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And I think that's the point that Commissioner Klempner is making, Vice Chair Klempner is making, and I would agree with him. If you're providing 78 parking spaces for the actual residential property, the units, then that makes sense that that's a demand. Adding the cost of public parking into the cost of the overall cost structure of the essential housing complex, driving up the per key price doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's something we'll have to discuss going forward, and particularly if we are going to see situations where I think I see MTS's partnership on this issue and trying to help address the housing crisis, but it does hurt the conversation and definition of affordable housing when you're increasing the cost. There's a cost driver that has nothing to do with the actual residents staying in the complex.
One more question. Thank you, Chair, for the clarification there as I'm sort of figuring out how to wrap my head around this. What do we know what the cost per stall is for those parking spaces?
I'm going to ask the developer if they have that, what the cost per stall is.
Is the developer on? I don't believe.
Yeah, see Jimmy and Tanya from Affirmed.
Yeah, Tanya, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, good morning, commissioners. My name is Tanya Mashiri, Affirmed Housing. I'm the project manager for this project. Before I jump into this, first and foremost, I want to thank San Diego Housing Commission staff for all their efforts to get us to this point. We appreciate everything you've done thus far. Each space is approximately going to be currently about $47,000.
Yeah, stall, and that's all structured parking as well. So with a project labor agreement with prevailing wages. So I know the project labor agreement aspect wasn't also, mentioned, but that's, a driver for some of these costs. I don't know. I'm not positive, but this might be the first deal to come across Housing Commission that's a PLA. So that's also, something that's a little bit more unique. That's by following MTS's policy 18 that they require for all their land sites. I would also say, from our standpoint, we completely agree with some of the comments regarding the replacement stalls. I think it's been a big discussion at MTS, and to the extent that the commissioners would like to advocate to MTS to further reduce those replacement stall requirements. Certainly us as affordable developers and our colleagues would appreciate that. Obviously, a lot of their sites are being utilized for affordable housing. And, to the extent that, people can prove out that the demand is much less on certain sites, they should be able to provide less, replacement stalls. So we kind of went through that situation here and ultimately, landed on this 85, stall replacement requirement. But again, for future deals, definitely would appreciate, the commissioners advocating for that. And I know Circulate San Diego also was, looking at providing reports regarding, those sites to MTS as well.
So I will make a note of that. And Jeff Davis, I know that we have a meeting scheduled coming up with Sandag. With Hassan, I think we should make a note to try and schedule some time with the CEO of MTS, Sharon Clooney, to discuss this. I do believe that, again, this is a cost driver on the housing project itself that, it is something we should be discussing as we look at utilizing properties from other agencies, as Vice Chair Klempner mentioned. And at 40, he said $40,000, $47,000 per stall, times 85. That's
3.9 million.
$3.9 million out of additional cost. And I would say this, it was Vice Chair Klempner's bringing this up. It is our responsibility as a housing commission to also envision what the future is going to look like. And I don't believe that the additional stalls that are being included in the cost here, really looks at the future. Ride share is becoming far more important, and utilized by more. I also think that San Diego has been the site of several failed car sharing projects in the past, Car2Go and et al. And at some point you have to think about, what is the future as it relates to, projects of this nature and parking and modes of transportation. And so this also just drives home the fact that the closer we build a transit, the better. And when we can avoid these additional costs, but we will make a note to try and meet with MTS. Appreciate those comments. So, and again, $3.9 million in extra costs for parking. Something.
Let me just also, I'm very appreciative to MTS that they're prioritizing affordable housing. So I don't want this to come across that way. I just think that it seems like we're all kind of on the same page here. That if you have a luxury hotel being approved and we're asking them to provide parking for the public as a benefit, as a condition, okay, that makes sense. Affordable housing is a little harder to swallow. Yeah,
I would agree. All right. Any further questions or comments, Vice Chair? Okay, we're good. Any other commissioners with questions or comments?
I had a question, if I could jump in. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to ask this very stupid question now and get it out of the way, because otherwise I'll have to ask it for every project you bring before us for at least the next year. With costs going up so quickly and inflation doing what it's doing, I understand refinancing a house. Can you walk me through, from a developer and from the commission side of things, how do we take advantage of, are there opportunities to take advantage of restructuring deals should the economy find sanity again while these things are moving through the process?
So this is Colin. I can speak to some of that. From the commission side, one of the challenges we've been having in restructuring deals is that one of the main sources of funding are 4% bonds and credits. And right now, the state is not prioritizing anything other than new construction. So if it's new construction, it's still super competitive to get those bonds. I think it's like less than 1% of their total private activity bond cap is being allocated to renovation projects and restructuring. So the challenge really is, even when that happened last year, we were able to get a couple deals refinanced, but that's because rates were so low, and we saw developers using Fannie and Freddie debt. Now with rates jumping to 7%, as Jennifer mentioned, we had some in the pipeline to refinance, and they basically called and told us, yeah, we're going to have to wait. And so until interest rates drop, or until CIDLAC either allocates more private activity bond cap to affordable housing, or of what they currently have allocates more of it to renovation projects, it's going to be really hard to get deals resyndicated or refinanced. And that's just from our perspective. I've been interested to hear what Jimmy or Tanya have to think.
Yeah, I'd be, from the developer perspective, how do you watch those opportunities? You can't slow down. I can appreciate that. But are you thinking sometimes it's best to just hold what financing you have and wait to move forward on a deal? Or
it's a really good question, and I think also what you're maybe hinting at is ultimately when you close on a deal, a year from now, interest rates are going to go down, and can you somehow capitalize on knowing that they're eventually going to go down? Sometimes what's hard is when you close a deal, the lender goes to their committee. We have seen certain deals where they'll allow you to upsize your loan a little bit, right? In which, let's say, rates go down and you can leverage more conventional debt on a deal. Sometimes they will allow for you to go up a little bit, but it's all kind of within reason. And I think a lot of times what's challenging with that is lenders are lenders. A lot of times they're looking at worst case scenarios, not best case scenarios. So on the conventional side, right? But I mean, who knows? I mean, to a certain extent, the commission could get maybe creative and you know, create a fund that could help with something like that if we are expecting rates to go down. I just don't know if I see it on the conventional mortgage side.
Yeah, it's I would agree with your comment, and I think Commissioner Benvenuto is on the right track here. You know, it's unfortunate. I think the time for creativity on this financing piece, Commissioner Benvenuto, was the last couple of years when the state had a $100 billion budget surplus. For those of you who are not paying attention, the numbers came in this morning. They're looking at potentially missing the number by 25 billion in revenue and maybe even more. So it can be a little harder to have that conversation, but I do think it's a conversation that is worthwhile. We need to start thinking about, you know, is there a way to create a fund, a unique fund specific for affordable housing, and it may have to be earmarked for even more than just affordable housing, but for specific sectors at all. So we will see.
Well, and I'm thinking about it too from the perspective of if our dollar is going less far in the next year, how do we strategically, and I leave it to the experts here. I've demonstrated I have no idea what I'm doing. You should trust me on this commission, but more importantly, you know, if the commission finds flexibility, because we are the folks with the will and sometimes some cash, how could we bridge some of those gaps in a sort of revolving situation, or giving folks the opportunity to come back to make sure that the money is going as far as it could? And I'll stop there.
No, I would agree with you. I concur. Jeff Davis, maybe you and Colin can come back and with some ideas after some discussion. I do think we should put some things on the table for people to consider. Okay. Any additional comments or questions? Commissioner Benvenuto?
No, I'll make a motion. I do think the project is wonderful, and I always appreciate Affirmed and what they bring to us and the partnership that we've been able to continue with them. So I apologize for not leading with that, but I'm happy to make a motion to approve.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second, yeah.
Commissioner Hubbard, no seconds.
It's Hester. It's Hester.
Oh, Commissioner Hester, my apologies. I will add a comment that you know, echoing what Commissioner Benvenuto just said to the folks at Affirmed. You know, I've been to several of your projects. I think you guys are doing great work. You're doing essential work. Keep up the good work is basically the statement. So thank you. All right, we have a motion and by Commissioner Benvenuto, a second by Commissioner Hester. I will now call the roll, and commissioners, please state your name, your vote in favor of in favor or opposition of the motion. Vice Chair Klumpner.
Aye, and congratulations on the new headquarters as well.
All right, there you have it. Commissioner Benvenuto.
Aye.
Commissioner Hester.
Aye.
Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye.
All right, all commissioners have voted in favor of the motion, and I will add my vote in favor, which means the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, commissioners, and thank you very much, Affirmed.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
Jennifer. As we close this out, one of the things that I will note for you and the team, you know, we often look at the cost of the 1-bedroom and 2-bedrooms of the projects we're approving. I would love to see something in the next meeting that shows us what the cost increases for 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom have been over the last 5 years. Are we seeing a steady increase? You know, as we talk about affordability, one of the things that we don't necessarily spend a lot of time on is, you know, how much has that 1-bedroom number changed? And I know that the commissioners, we've talked about that it does depend on the per key price often, but would love to see if there's any way to put something together, Jennifer. I trust that you have all that information, and if we could look at what's happened over the last 5 years, that'd be wonderful.
Yep, we can definitely do something for you for that.
Thank you very much. All right, item 104 is next up on the agenda, and this is the contract with the Salvation Army to operate Haven Interim Family Shelter Program. Members of the public who wish to speak on this item should press *9 on their phones now to raise their hand. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. Up to this point, no written public comments have been submitted regarding this item. Casey Snell, Vice President of Administration for Homelessness Initiatives, will present this item with Special Program Manager and Senior Policy Advisor, Jonathan Herrera. And please begin when you two are ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. We are presenting staff's recommendation to approve the fiscal year 23 agreement between the San Diego Housing Commission and the Salvation Army to operate the Haven Interim Family Shelter Program. Next slide, please. The Haven Interim Family Shelter Program will provide 9 units in a non-congregate shelter setting for families with children that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the city of San Diego. The units are located at the Salvation Army Door of Hope campus in the Linda Vista community. Referrals into the program will be facilitated through the Coordinated Shelter Intake Program, which the Housing Commission administers. Large families, families with children under the age of 4, or families where a member or members have a disabling condition will be prioritized for entry into the Haven Interim Family Shelter Program. The program supports the goals of the Community Action Plan on Homelessness for the city, which identifies shelter interventions as critical entry points to the city's crisis response system. The program is an important component to the vision, principles, and strategies identified in the action plan and would provide a critical shelter resource for families with higher needs and barriers. The units were previously used to provide resources to families during the pandemic, and the funding source for these units has expired and was a non-renewable source. Housing Commission funding provides the opportunity to provide 9 units of non-congregate emergency shelter support to support families in need. Approval of the operating agreement will help fill a system gap for non-congregate shelter for higher need families and incorporate the resource into the Coordinated Shelter Intake Program. Next slide, please. The Salvation Army has been serving individuals experiencing homelessness or facing economic hardship in San Diego since 1887 and currently maintains a diverse portfolio of programs that serve persons experiencing homelessness. This includes interim housing, transitional housing, prevention and diversion, outreach, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. The Door of Hope campus was recently renovated and incorporates several of the organization's programs. In addition to the Haven Interim Family Shelter, on-site programs include the Transitional Living Center, which is partially funded by the Housing Commission, Rapid Rehousing for Families, Permanent Supportive Housing for Families, and Adult Rehab Center. Next slide, please. The Haven Interim Family Shelter Program will provide a service-enhanced interim shelter program aligned with Housing First principles 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, housing-focused case management, which includes the development of a housing plan and support with identifying permanent or longer-term housing options, coordination with and referrals to county, state, and federal programs, supportive services in connection to an array of community resources, including employment and childcare, self-sufficiency and life skill classes, and the maintenance of a good neighbor policy focused on engagement with the surrounding community to support clean, safe, and welcoming environment. Next slide, please. Basic shelter services will include appropriate 24-hour residential services and staffing, maximum of 9 units with furnishings, routine operating supplies, mail services, access to on-site laundry services, and access to an on-site pantry. Next slide, please.
On June 30th, 2022, the Housing Commission issued a request for qualifications seeking to increase the availability of shelter resources that serve specific subpopulations, which included LGBTQIA, transition age youth, veterans, single women, families, seniors, and individuals that are medically frail or have co-occurring health conditions. The RFQ was posted and made available for download on the Planet Bids website through both the Housing Commission's and City of San Diego's portals. More than 393 notifications were sent through the Planet Bid system, and 36 potential bidders downloaded the solicitation. At the RFQ closing on July 25th, 2022, proposals were received from 4 respondents: Father's Joe's Villages, the Salvation Army, Equitable Solutions, Social Solutions, LLC, and the San Diego LGBT Community Center. A source selection committee evaluated and scored and ranked the responses based on the respondent's profile, capacity and readiness, service delivery model and qualifications, and equity and inclusion. Of the responses that were deemed qualified, this project was prioritized for implementation as the Salvation Army provided a site location and service model that could be operationalized quickly and met a critical need in providing shelter resources for higher need families. Next slide, please. As outlined in the table on the slide above, operating costs for the initial contract term are $175,196, with an annual budget of $280,313. The ability to leverage significant resources on the Door of Hope campus means that the per bed night rate for the Housing Commission is only $24. For the funding for the Haven Interim Family Shelter will be provided through the allocation of Housing Commission Moving to Work funds. In addition, the Salvation Army will be leveraging $400,000 in agency funds to support operational expenses. These funds cover additional administrative costs, maintenance, landscaping, and other operational costs. Future contract terms will be executed based on funding availability. Next slide. Housing Commission staff recommend that the Board of Commissioners take the action detailed in the staff report and shown on the following slides. Next slide. Next slide. That concludes our presentation, and we're available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Casey and Jonathan. Really appreciate the hard work as always. Do we have any callers at this time, Scott Marshall?
We do not have any callers. Thank you.
All right, this concludes the public comment period for item 104. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments on this item?
I'll jump in. I just want to applaud staff. This is really incredible, and I can only imagine the sort of work that had to go into getting this off the ground. That bed rate is
crazy. Yeah.
I hesitate to even highlight it in case.
I know.
I don't want to jinx it.
I thought it was a typo to be honest, Commissioner Benvenuto, and I read it and I'm thinking they're going to correct this at the meeting. So
well, it's due to the resources that Salvation Army is bringing to the table. So Megan's here, and just want to say that they're a great partner to work with. They always bring a lot to the table. It's a really unique project. We can serve some larger families that have a really hard time in congregate settings, and also families that have challenges and barriers that might make it difficult for children to adjust in those congregate settings. So a great opportunity through that RFQ process.
Thank you, Lisa. Any further comments or questions about item 104? Before we look for motion, I will say I will add this comment to again commend the team on this effort. I'm happy there were 4 bidders. That's nice to see. I think you picked a great opportunity to partner with Salvation Army, and this is something that you guys will hear me say consistently over the next 6 months. And Lisa and Jeff have heard me say this quite a bit. It is the fall and it is the winter, and activities and actions like these will make a big difference. We often allow the discussion to focus on the single individual that's living on the streets, but we have a number of families in these instances, in these situations, where you can create a shelter structure for families, especially with families with young children, are vital. And I love the fact that you're going to have a food pantry on site, Casey and Jonathan. I would ask that you guys explore more opportunity for food pantry partnerships with both Feeding America and the San Diego Food Bank. I have had several meetings with the 2 organizations, because as the economy tightens, we will need to make sure that we are providing food pantry opportunities so people can access food, and especially families with children aren't worried about hunger situations. And the ease of having a food pantry on site makes it much more impactful. So the good job on this. And again, it's fall and winter, and anytime we can add beds, and as Commissioner Benvenuto said, at this cost, it's the bed that really matters, and you guys are doing a great job of being efficient and effective. So, all right, commissioners, that being said, no further comments, questions. I'm looking for a motion and a second.
So moved.
Motion by Vice Chair Klempner.
Second.
Was that Commissioner Hester again?
Benvenuto.
Benvenuto, but you put your finger in front of your mouth like you were trying to fool me, Commissioner Benvenuto. It worked, and I was like, okay. So
well, the me being off mute was a pretty good indication, I thought.
Okay, well, fair enough. That's fine. I mean, it's, man. Okay, so we now have motion and a second on the item, on item 104. And are there any further comments? If none, I will, as I say, please state your vote on the motion. Vice Chair Klempner.
Aye.
Commissioner Benvenuto.
Aye. Someone's at entryway. Someone's at my door.
The UPS guy has to stop delivering, Stephanie, during the board meetings. That's all I ask. Okay. Commissioner Hester
Aye.
and Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye.
All right, 4 ayes. I will add my aye in favor of the motion, and the motion passes 5-0. Okay, well, that takes care of item 104. We will now, as I got distracted by, the UPS guy at Commissioner Benvenito's door. We will now move on to item 105. Next item is an informational workshop presentation about homelessness prevention. Members of the public who wish to speak on this item should press *9 on their phones to raise their hand. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. No written public comments were submitted regarding this item. Interim President and CEO Jeff Davis will introduce this item, and which will be presented by Executive Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, Lisa Jones. And Jeff and Lisa, before you begin, my fellow commissioners, we thought this was a timely discussion because what we're seeing now are all the indicators of a wave that is headed towards San Diego. In particular, you're seeing all the articles about rent increases at 10%, minimum 10%. You're seeing layoff articles happen more often. And one of the things I will note is in talking to a variety of people throughout the corporate structure in California, the first quarter of next year could truly be a difficult one, as most of the tech companies will begin to look at what they need to do to right size. And as the economy slows, the people who are most at risk are often the people that we don't talk to enough. Commissioner Hester, you and I both agreed when we were receiving the dollars from the federal government and the state about on housing and utility assistance that we needed to try and work a little harder as an agency, and all the commissioners agreed. And I think that we were the shining example of how to be effective in helping people get through that debilitating debt. In this instance, I think we have to do a lot more to talk to people ahead of time, ahead of this wave, to find out who's at risk of evictions and of being homeless. I have asked the 2 food banks if they can start to ask people that are standing at food distribution lines, are you at risk of eviction over the next 6 months? I think Commissioner Hester, one of the things I want to do is talk to Bridget Browning, who has been a great partner in some of these conversations. Is there a way that we can actually begin to ask this question of the labor members who are working in the hospitality sector, who may be at risk of losing hours and reduced income, and if they're at risk? But we have to do a lot more to think about what's coming and what we're doing to prevent people from actually being on the streets. And so with that intro, Jeff and Lisa, I will turn it over to you so that you can begin now.
Actually, Chair, you teed that up for Lisa better than I could have, so I'll just turn it right over to Lisa.
All right, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Next slide, please. Through our Housing for San Diego Homelessness Action Plan, the Housing Commission implemented prevention programming in 2017 as a core component of addressing homelessness. Our prevention programming has continued to grow and also refine as needs change. These programs help families at risk of homelessness to remain permanently housed. We provide case management, including housing stabilization, counseling, mediation, and financial assistance, such as temporary help paying rent, including rent arrears. We also leverage our landlord engagement and assistance programs where necessary to strengthen stabilization efforts, or when we cannot keep the family in their original unit, to identify a new unit to help prevent the household from experiencing homelessness. Preventing homelessness not only avoids the traumatic experience of losing housing, it also reduces demands for temporary shelter beds and other forms of housing assistance. Next slide. Homelessness prevention can generally be categorized into 3 main stages. What we traditionally think about as prevention programming are programs that focus on a household's immediate housing crisis, such as our Housing First San Diego prevention programs. But focusing on what is known as upstream prevention can broaden not only our understanding of our existing efforts the Housing Commission undertakes, but also help identify earlier opportunities to prevent housing crisis from occurring in the first place. Upstream prevention efforts include activities that target assistance to reduce the risk of housing crisis within communities. Macro level examples would be ensuring an adequate supply of affordable housing, addressing systemic racial inequities, improving education and meaningful and gainful employment, and ensuring access to affordable childcare, legal assistance, and physical and behavioral health care. These cross-sector strategies may be less often perceived as homelessness prevention, and they include many activities that typically are not within the Housing Commission's purview. However, they can have some of the greatest impact on preventing homelessness. There may be opportunities here for the Housing Commission to work with community partners, leveraging resources to support these types of efforts. We can also continue to examine our own policies and practices from an equity, access, and communication perspective to advance these efforts. Mid-range prevention efforts include activities that reduce the risk of homelessness while households are engaged with or are transitioning from systems. Preventing homelessness through enhanced cross-system collaboration, including systems such as healthcare, child welfare, and corrections. This also includes a focus on housing stability and looking for early signs of potential instability, as well as effective transition and/or discharge planning. A recurring focus in this stage is ensuring households know how to avail themselves of mainstream resources, including public benefits, employment and healthcare, to reduce the risk of homelessness upon discharge from systems or following the end of service provision. The final stage that is more commonly understood as prevention involves efforts to address an immediate housing crisis, targeting assistance to prevent housing crises from escalating further and resulting in homelessness. Our Housing First San Diego prevention programs are in this category, and I'll discuss those later in the presentation. In most communities, this immediate assistance is provided through mainstream systems or through the homelessness services system. Prevention services in this category often include a combination of financial assistance, mediation with landlords, legal services, and other supports. When multiple systems provide prevention assistance, it is key that they be coordinated and utilize common assessment tools to identify and assist those that are at the greatest risk of homelessness. Next slide. Our current Housing First San Diego prevention programs help households in immediate housing crises remain housed. The Prevention Extension Pilot Program helps people at imminent risk of homelessness whose current needs exceed our original homelessness prevention and diversion program guidelines, serving households that need a higher level of assistance to stabilize their current housing crisis. It provides for deeper and longer term assistance and up to 6 months in certain circumstances. We have stabilized over 700 households through our Housing First San Diego prevention programs. Our Landlord Engagement and Assistance, or LEAP program, provides incentives and benefits to landlords who rent to San Diegans experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk of homelessness. LEAP also provides housing location and financial assistance for tenants to pay security deposits and application fees, and the team communicates regularly with our portfolio of landlords to support long-term stable tenancies. Next slide. I mentioned the mid-range forms of prevention. Additional programs in the mid-range category of prevention are the Housing Instability Prevention Program, approved by City Council in June 2022. This program can serve up to 300 households with $500 of rental assistance per month for up to 24 months. The program prioritizes households experiencing significant housing instability, such as high rent burdens and vulnerable populations. Seniors, households with persons with disabilities, transition-age youth, and families with children under 5 are prioritized, and ongoing case management is provided to identify other long-term stable housing options for those families. Another example of a mid-range prevention effort is assistance provided to residents experiencing relocation when a single-room occupancy site undergoes redevelopment. Many of those residents are often quite vulnerable with extremely low incomes and few personal resources. Over the past 5 years, the Housing Commission has leveraged the Housing First San Diego prevention team to work with our real estate division staff, engaging with over 400 households in 10 different SRO communities. The team provides housing search and placement services, as well as connection to mainstream benefits and other community resources. Next slide. As I mentioned on the previous slide, connection to mainstream resources is critical to strengthen a household's long-term tenancy. As a key agency in this work, the partnerships that the Housing Commission forges with educational institutions, county benefit and welfare agencies, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders can be incredibly powerful tools. Enhanced cross-system collaboration can create increased awareness of resources as well as challenges. It can foster an intentional focus on housing stability wherever public service agencies are engaging with households that may be vulnerable to housing crises. Effective transition or discharge planning between institutions such as healthcare and justice-involved programs can also prevent housing crises. This ensures individuals are effectively connected to mainstream resources such as employment and healthcare to reduce the risk of homelessness upon discharge or after service provision ends. Next slide. Upstream interventions focus on preventing the housing crisis in the first place for households that may be vulnerable to housing loss. The Guardian Scholars Program, a partnership between San Diego State University Research Foundation and the Housing Commission, provides rental assistance for up to 100 students per year who have experienced homelessness in the past or at risk of homelessness. Guardian Scholars serve youth aging out of the foster care system under legal guardianship, designated as wards of the court, or unaccompanied youth, and ensures an affordable education is accessible for the participating students. The city's COVID-19 Housing Stability and Assistance Program, which the Housing Commission administered through the Rental Assistance Division, provided over $218 million in rent relief to over 18,300 households during the pandemic to stabilize and keep households in their existing housing. Next slide. Effective upstream prevention efforts require a multi-sector approach and active focus on reducing the prevalence of housing crises. Prevention at this level is not and cannot be the responsibility of the homelessness services system alone. The best opportunities to reduce housing crisis from occurring in the first place are when multiple sectors focus on continuing to develop an adequate supply of affordable housing, addressing systemic racial inequities across systems, improving access to education and meaningful and gainful employment, and improving access to affordable childcare, legal assistance, and physical and behavioral health resources. Next slide. The Housing Commission efforts in this area include the continuous focus of this board and staff on creating and preserving affordable rental housing. There are over 24,000 affordable rental units in the service in the city of San Diego today, and 2,529 affordable units have received Housing Commission board approval and are pending completion. These units include new construction and rehabilitation units. The Housing Commission's 2020 Affordable Housing Preservation Report identified strategies to preserve affordable housing units. The report noted that over 13,000 units are at risk of losing affordability between 2020 and 2040. Approximately 2/3 of those units are naturally occurring affordable housing units that do not have any deed restrictions in place, and 1/3 are units with deed restrictions that require rents to remain affordable at specific income levels. The report led to the City Council's approval in October 2020 of 7 actions to implement a strategy for affordable housing preservation. The Housing Commission continues to support the city in addressing the homelessness crisis through programs such as diversion, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. At the same time, we must also maintain focus on upstream efforts and opportunities to reduce the inflow of people experiencing homelessness. These upstream efforts include increasing affordable housing, strengthening collaboration across systems, and enhancing communication strategies to reduce the number of households that experience a housing crisis in the first place. Next slide. That concludes the workshop, and we're available for any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. As always, appreciate it. We will now take public comments from callers on this item. Scott Marshall, do we have anybody in the queue awaiting a comment on this item?
We do not have any callers. Thank you.
All right. This concludes the public comment aspect for item 105. And we will now go to commissioners. There's an informational item, so there's no action required, but commissioners, do you have any comments before we move to the next item?
I thank you for this presentation, Lisa. Always insightful and helpful in terms of understanding our system. I'm curious on and let me get my on the preservation report, the strategies to preserve affordable housing units. I know that, and you know, if Commissioner Vasquez was here, she'd probably be asking the same question in terms of keeping track of the affordable housing that's losing their covenants. And where's the city on that, or us even?
So I am not the expert in that area. It's just all hands on deck. So we have Molly and Emily here that can respond to that. Emily, if you're ready to go.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to answer that. And it's a great question. And as we all know, we need to address production and preservation. We do have under Molly Chase a very robust preservation unit. through our efforts developing the affordable housing database a few years back that has been very, very instrumental in us making data informed decisions, but also tracking the NOAA as well as the expiring covenants. Through Molly Shoppin, she can expand upon this. We have a 10-year look back on expiring covenants. It takes a very long time to develop and redevelop. And so we have those conversations early. Most of the folks that are currently utilizing the properties for affordable housing will come in when the financing is sort of right and reposition those for the next life of the property. But we do keep very close tabs on them through our preservation unit. Molly, any more on that?
Thanks, Emily, and thanks, Commissioner Hester. I will also add, we have had an interagency preservation working group and a preservation stakeholder working group. Those were two of the recommendations in the preservation study. And our biggest focus has been trying to get resources from the city to allocate towards preservation while we have the data and the tracking of the units naturally occurring and deed restricted that are ending their affordability restrictions. What we do not have right now are the resources available to purchase or preserve those properties. We do have 3 city council members for the first time in this last budget memo cycle put preservation resources as one of their top priorities, ranging from $5 to $7 million. And so we're prioritizing trying to get some initial investment from the city to support this work. And then hopefully we can go from there and expand those efforts.
Thank you, Emily and Molly. Commissioner Hester, did that answer your question?
I mean, somewhat. I mean, there's some nuances I want to dig deeper, but I want to let me allow other commissioners to ask their questions as well. Thank you, though, Molly and Emily and Lisa.
Yeah, before I move to Vice Chair Clemner, Emily and Molly, I think one of the things that would be helpful for this discussion, because I see what Commissioner Hester's where she's angling on this. The units that are you in the Lisa's report mentioned 2020, 2040. There's some units that are at risk of not being restricted as far as cost. Can you map those out for us? I do. One of the things I think that would be helpful for us is to see what's at risk. So we can see kind of zip code wise. There are certain zip codes where these units are essential. They're high. They are high hospitality sector zip codes potentially. But and when you look at it from an income, household median income standpoint, there are some zip code. There's some information. But if we can get a better map and understanding of what's at risk, I agree with what you're doing in the efforts and the conversations with the city. But I also think that if we can define it a little better, may create a little more urgency on let's find a solution quicker.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair. Now, I'm sorry. Just I think here's the thing. So NOFAs are naturally occurring affordable housing units, right? Is different from units that have covenants. I just want to be specifically, since we're doing an education on this piece, and I understood it from the part that back in the day when covenants were issued by the governments, the land to use that piece to build affordable housing, that was sort of part of, and that's the piece that's what happened with the PQ Village, right? And really lands are given to developers, and they develop the housing affordable after the 55th year, right? They get to own this property as sort of a payment for them to develop this property. And I'm saying that I think Molly, you were part of this discussion a long time ago too. Everybody understands where I'm coming from on this. I think that we really need to take advantage and leverage our positions here. And I'm not the expert on any of this, not one bit, but when this is a big issue and we're staying in a lane of NOFA and affordable housing and not addressing this, and I'm not hearing a concrete address to this particular issue, I think that's where I'm raising my flags. So okay. I appreciate you.
Emily and Molly, you guys will come back with that direction and we will have a further discussion. So Vice Chair Klempner.
So I'm I'm going to jump into what we were just discussing here, but I want to pause for a moment and just say thank you to Lisa and her whole team for that info item before we drill down on this one specific part that was at the end that I think has a lot of our attention. And if there's one thing that I've really kind of absorbed from all of this issue is the complexity in terms of people experiencing homelessness are not a monolith by any stretch. It's extremely complicated. There's degrees of homelessness, there's durations of it, there's different circumstances. I mean, it's such a complex issue, and I think we kind of have an obligation to, and the commission staff are doing a wonderful job of this, of help the public understand that this is not just you see homelessness around and like it's one thing. It is incredibly complicated. And on that, before I go on to what I was about to say, I keep hearing more and more stories about people who are living in vehicles and then having vehicles impounded. And
Egregious.
I just want to give it a chance for staff to comment on this. And I've certainly talked to other policymakers about, I mean, it just, given the resources that well, first of all, let's just say from the human side of this, if we're thinking about the scale of the homelessness experience, the idea of pushing somebody from, being sheltered in a vehicle that they own to having no shelter at all is just a heartbreaking and tragic thing to watch play out as a policy outcome. And then just when we think about the amount of public resources we are devoting to tackling this problem, I mean, we were all just wowed that we were seeing $24 a night bed space, and what a fantastic partnership that is. And I just keep thinking about how many times we're trying to collect $400 in back tickets from somebody or something, and so we impound their car, and now we are providing shelter and all kinds of other services to try to stabilize and rehouse that person. And it just seems like, I mean, I understand why the parking and traffic enforcement rules were not created as a housing policy. They do a different thing, but is there any movement on this subject in terms of that?
So thank you, Commissioner Klumpner. I mean, obviously, we can't speak to the requirements and expectations on law enforcement at a state level around, expired vehicles and things like that and how that impacts the broader system. But we do know that we have a coordinated outreach system, and we have a rapid response team in PATH that is part of that system. So, an opportunity to strengthen connection and communication between law enforcement and that rapid response team, so that, if that's something that, if it's not something that can be adjusted because the regulations and the state law requires what they require, is there an opportunity to make sure that law enforcement can connect in real time to these rapid response teams? Right, would be.
I mean, that makes sense. That's like the absolute best that this agency can do, given that we don't control those law enforcement rules. I guess question for you, Jeff, anybody else, my fellow commissioners, would there be any appetite for the commissioners to perhaps send a letter both to the state to ask the state and our legislators to consider revising state law to allow local jurisdictions to create some exemptions with respect to preventing homelessness? And I think similarly, would there be any appetite to send a letter to the city to ask the city if they could work with the Housing Commission on exploring ways to prevent people from being removed from vehicles that are used as a shelter?
Yeah, Vice Chair Klumpner, I will say that we've had some extensive conversations over the last few days about this this topic. Lisa and Jeff, I think I was taken aback by the Voice's articles on the most recent situation. Jeff Davis did a good job of saying we have to look into every situation, but I think your direction and your statement is appropriate. What can we do? In the end, every time law enforcement decides to tow someone's vehicle that they're living in, they're creating homelessness.
Mhm.
And so no matter what we talk about here at the commission, and no matter what we state as a focus as it relates to prevention, and when you look at projects that like Casey and Jonathan just worked on, if you're creating the clients because you're towing a vehicle, then you're going backwards. I think that's the harsh reality, is that I understand that there are rules and laws as it relates to citations. I think Lisa has informed me that we've had a number of RFQs or RFPs out for safe lots for people to be able to live in their cars. I think that I don't believe that there is any restriction on the city council halting towing of vehicles. And I thought, Lisa, correct me wrong, but I thought the city council did make that decision 6 months ago that they were going to stop towing vehicles after the story about the RV and the family that lost the RV. And you and the team did a great job of finding a location for them to house their families. But I thought there was a decision by the city that, okay, maybe we should at this moment relax this focus on ticketing and towing, because it is creating homelessness in its sense, by having this action. Was I not clear on that?
I can't speak to what the city council and city attorney's office have been working on in that regard. I mean, there are definitely some OVO or oversized vehicle ordinances in place. I will say what the city has done well is stand up safe parking lots, right? But what we want to figure out is how we connect people to those safe parking spaces. If that can be another option, as opposed to, and then get that service provider that's at that safe lot to try to get that household sort out their registration or their vehicle or their ticketing issues, right? So if they're in an environment where the vehicle can remain and they can then sort those things out, the city just stood up another safe parking lot at Rose Canyon. So there's some safe parking resources that are out there. And this is a perfect example of what we talk about cross system, and cross sector collaboration and communication. This like dovetails right into that conversation that we just had. It's just getting that safe parking lot, PD, outreach to kind of work together to figure that out. I think is a potential opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. I think, Vice Chair Clemmer, what we can talk about at the end before we move from this item is whether or not we can have a conversation with the mayor's office about halting the focus on citations and tickets and towing. I think that it's a reasonable question during this time period. And Lisa, I know we're standing up a lot of safe lots. We as an organization, as an agency, are going to communicate more aggressively about where those safe lots are and where people can go. But there's still the element of, if you're putting people on the streets because if you're living in your car, it's because you can't afford you can't find a place that you can afford to live under a roof. Well, if you can't find a place to live under a roof, then you're probably not going to be able to pay your registration, and that sticker shouldn't, that's just a harsh reality. I've always been baffled by this. Is I'm not going to avoid paying my car registration because I want to get my car towed. If I'm living in my car, it's because I can't afford a place to live, and I'm living in my car as my only shelter. We saw this during the 2008 crisis. People were living in their cars, showering at the gym, going to work, and then when they finished working, they were going back to their cars and they were spending the night there. Now, in that instance, they still had a job, but in many instances, people that are living in their cars now are just financially strapped. And I think that's where we have a crisis that we have to address, and that maybe temporarily, but we need to address it, because it doesn't make a lot of sense putting people out of their cars onto the streets to where we then have to scramble to find a place. So that's I think Vice Chair Klempner's correct in his question. We just have to figure out what's the right path. Commissioner Hester.
No, I've lots to say. I'm very unhappy about the story I read from the Voice of San Diego, right? And I do think that, you know, a program could potentially be, we're helping people with rent. Can we help with registration? Can we postpone? I mean, they tow it and the story said $4,200 to get it back.
Which again, if you didn't have the if you didn't have the $200 to pay the registration,
Right.
you're not going to have the additional $4,000.
Absolutely.
Common sense. You're right.
So I am expressing how appalled I am about and this crisis and I'm glad to hear that we're looking into that and that there's further discussions around how we can support, but definitely this is like in bad taste for police and sheriff to be towing people's cars. And could we perhaps look into registering, like if they have an identification that they are a homeless car and that they be left alone or something to that effect, so that so it's more clear who.
Yeah, I think I will say this. One of the most heartbreaking things I've seen was a family. Obviously, they were living in their car. All their items were in the car, and they had traffic citations and expired tags, and they were asked to take all their belongings out and put it on the curb, and then the car was towed, and all that happened in that situation was hope being shattered, and that's the unfortunate part. Is nothing was accomplished other than hope being shattered, because that family now had all their belongings on the curb, and their car was being towed away, and it's again, what has to fuel us as a commission is one act of kindness, and we have to try and be problem solvers. And I think this is a situation that requires a bigger conversation, a conversation about solutions, because there has to be something that we can do to prevent the situation during this unprecedented.
Perhaps that's the letter we write to the officers.
Yeah, I agree. Commissioner Hubbard?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add to my thoughts to that. I feel like, I mean, this is beyond probably the Housing Commission and going to, state and levels, but what it means to be evicted. Like when we had the California eviction moratorium, it was people were not allowed to be evicted for inability to pay rent. I mean, if you look at, if you're living in your car, I mean, that is essentially, your home. And if you're unable to pay on that, then, it would seem as if that protection should kind of reach over to those living in their car, using their car as a home, and getting it towed for the inability to pay is, in a sense, to me, like an eviction. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I agree.
I get your point. Obviously, there were things done. They were tenant protections put in place during COVID, and because it was the right thing to do. And in this instance, the tenant is someone that's living in their vehicle, and whether it's an individual or it's a family. And I said, there are a lot of questions for us to ask. And you're right, this is not something we have jurisdiction. We don't have the ability to control it, but we have every responsibility to ask questions about how to resolve it and address it properly. So, Vice Chair Klempner.
I want to give Lisa. I saw Lisa about to say something before I switch topics here.
Yeah, I was just going to say this is a perfect example of why communication across systems is so critical. We know that when evictions happen, and this was even pre-COVID, we worked with the sheriffs to make sure that folks in the city of San Diego knew about our prevention and diversion programs. They had a flyer, they had those resources, they could post those with that eviction. That's another way to look at this, is making sure that folks that are in these enforcement positions know what the resources are that are available to the folks that they're impacting, right? So, connection to the coordinated outreach teams, connection to the rapid response teams, at the first time that, because if you read this CBS story, or at least the story that came out last week, it sounded like there were multiple engagements with those families before the car was finally impounded. If information on how to connect to outreach and connect to other resources had happened earlier on, it might not have ended up there, right? So this again goes back to that conversation around how critical it is that the sectors that intersect with and engage with people experiencing homelessness are communicating effectively with each other and are sharing about resources.
That certainly seems like a common theme across the subject, with lots of work left to be done there. So thank you. I'm going to hop back to the preservation for a second here, and I have a question that's probably, I'm guessing, more of a Colin question, but whoever wants to take it. So Commissioner Hester was discussing both the NOAA issue and the preservation, and I appreciate the distinction between those two things, because they get kind of mushed together a lot in how we talk about them, and they are kind of very different. On the preservation, I mean, I am very interested in this, because I think if there's one thing we've picked up, it's that there's not an easy solution to the preservation issue, because attracting the investment and the capital that's required to produce new affordable housing does require that the terms that we set up on the front end. So it's not as simple as we can just require people to keep affordable housing. We need to come up with something that works for them. I do seem to recall, though, that we in previous years we had kind of seen more rehab projects come through, and a lot of those did involve extensions of the deed restrictions, and that seemed to me like that was, I mean, we focus so much on when units are lost, but or converted, I should say, to other types of housing, but I mean, we've actually had quite a lot of units where that could have happened, but the owners chose to take additional financing, make improvements to the property, and in exchange extend the duration of the deed restrictions. And so I wanted to kind of point that out, that like there is a mechanism that has worked, and the problem is that it doesn't extend to every property, and that's kind of part of the issue here. But Colin, you mentioned earlier that with the changes in the bond market and interest rates and all these other complicated factors, that we were essentially only using those bonds for, or the state, I should say, is really only using those bonds for new construction. Am I thinking about this correctly, that there's like a spillover into the preservation side, in that it is harder now for owners that wish to make improvements and extend those deed restrictions through those bonds now have less resources they can access, just because of kind of what has changed in the market and at the state level?
Yeah, Commissioner Klumpner, you're hitting the nail on the head. That's absolutely what's happening. The last project we brought before the board for approval, I believe, was Las Serenas, which was a community housing works project. They were one of the last deals to get in under the lower interest rate. And so, to your point, they extended the term of their affordability. They paid off their existing first mortgage. They refinanced with a new first mortgage, and used some of the proceeds to make some meaningful repairs to the project. Now, that was one of the last deals that had had the 3 to 4% interest rates. With those interest rates hitting 7%, we had at least 2 deals that were poised to do the exact same thing, which would extend the term of the affordability and then provide some meaningful repairs. They were actually proposing to not use tax credits, because the development community has kind of figured out that they can't use the bond program because the state's not allocating those resources, and so they found new ways to do it. With those rates going up, that new way of refinancing and repositioning a property is no longer available to them. So I think you're right. With rising interest rates and the bonds being super competitive, there's not only competitive, but also not being allocated to renovation projects. There's no good vehicle yet. And that's something we've been talking about internally, what we can do as a housing commission, because the concern is you have a large, we are creating more affordable housing, which is neat. We need new housing, but there's also a concern that you'll have this backlog of deals that really have some repairs that are outstanding that are not getting funded to replace. And we've been talking internally about what we can do as an agency to help those deals like that in San Diego. But you're absolutely right.
And then related to that, I mean, is the interest rate situation also kind of reducing the number of, because I could see that the one thing that we may have going for us here is that it's also harder to redevelop some of those sites. So like the appeal of taking old affordable units that are at the end of their deed restriction and redeveloping into market rate, it's not really an ideal time for that either. Are these things kind of like, is there a push-pull going on here, I guess, for lack of a better term, that, or I guess my underlying question here is, are we going to see a spike in the loss of units just because of the market conditions and the financing structure, or is one thing kind of even, counterbalancing the other?
Yeah, so I've got just a quick thought on that. To answer your question about the market rate, what the market rate side is doing. From my limited experience in working on market rate deals, their margins are very tight, and so a change in the interest rate of even a percentage point can put a deal on ice. And so I think if I had to guess, what we're going to see is your larger developing companies who have the capital to hold projects. If they own land, they can hold that land and wait a year or two for rates to drop and then redevelop it. Your smaller developers who may have kind of put all their eggs in one basket, so to speak, to buy a property, and they may not have the resources to hold that property while they wait for, and on all those carrying costs while they wait for interest rates to drop. That actually could be an opportunity for the Housing Commission. If you think back to the Great Recession, there were a number of failed condo deals that, in Los Angeles, when I was working up there, we were able to purchase them and convert them into affordable housing fairly quickly using the Neighborhood Stabilization Program funds. So if we see something similar start to occur here in San Diego, this actually might be an opportunity for the Housing Commission to acquire some parcels or some buildings.
Great. And then last kind of couple things on this subject. I'm remembering, if I'm remembering correctly, the commission has first right of refusal on when these. So the question and the point that's made earlier about council members suggesting for the budget. The idea there is basically that we have resources to strike when and if an opportunity arises where a deed is expiring, and we do have that option. Is that's the use there? Okay, very interesting. And my last comment on this, I would just, I have never seen an affordable housing new construction that I didn't like. I approve them all, as you all see. I similarly do have a positive view of market rate, specifically multifamily housing market rate, and the reason that is, in my mind, I don't think of them as separate from each other, because the naturally occurring affordable housing that we're monitoring and tracking right now is market rate housing that was built a long time ago. And I think one way to think about our shortage, just kind of for the benefit of public watching and our discussions here, one of the problems with our severe shortage that we have right now and why we're so reliant on these deed restrictions is that since the 80s basically we haven't been building enough of that, and so there's been nothing coming in behind to create more naturally occurring affordable housing. So all these tools that we're dealing with preservation to some extent are like last resorts that we're stuck with, given that we can't go back to 1990 and build 100,000 apartments that would currently be more affordable. So anyway,
I think Commissioner Clemner, what you're bringing up, I think what Commissioner Hester mentioned in terms of covenant and and then I'll go back to what Commissioner Benvenuto asked around, financing in the current market. I think this opens the door for a much more in-depth workshop around this whole topic. As Colin mentioned, we may be able to create some progress or some ideas when there's an opportunity. I think part of the struggle with this conversation is what do we need to preserve, and what do we need to build? I know Emily and I, we met with 15 affordable housing developers recently. They talked about having anywhere from 2,100 to 2,500 units that are queued up, but it's all going to come down to financing, if they can get financing, and there was a lot of if aspect. And I think that one of the things that we probably should spend a lot more time on is the combination of what's available today, what we need to be considering to aid in the construction. I'm with you. I've never seen an affordable housing project that I don't like. Again, I asked the questions about where they are in relation to transit, but I think that our infrastructure is inadequate currently, and the definition of adequate is something that probably a lot of people are asking. What how many units, and it's the sum total. If we lose a bunch of units that are right now covered because they all fall off and they move on and they're converted into market rate, then that's a problem. So there's a bigger, broader conversation. What I would suggest, Vice Chair Clemmer, do you have any other questions on that, or you? What I would suggest, Jeff Davis, is that this, this is it's a complex conversation, and this probably requires and would be beneficial for the commission to have a longer conversation about how we should be looking at this. Jeff.
Yeah, just some excellent commissioner questions. This has been an excellent discussion, and I think you read my mind. I think a broader conversation is probably needed, and we could actually, if you'd like, we could fold our item 106 into that broader conversation and include recycled bonds and bring a workshop with all of this before you next month.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that it's again, and this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the meeting, Lisa, about people want to know that we're actually making progress. Right. And so when it comes to shelter beds, are we making progress? We're moving forward, providing more shelter. When it comes to housing and units that are available, are we making progress? And progress on the housing side really is going to be dependent on in many ways, the efforts that we take to preserve, but also to promote construction of, and that's going to be all tied to financing. So Commissioner Hester.
Hi, I wanted to ask about not just prevention, or in addition to prevention. Oh my gosh, it's my birthday. I forgot.
Exactly. Well, but that's a great excuse. No, it's your birthday. I mean, you don't have to think about things, because
Happy birthday.
Thank you very, 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 very much. I'll think about it again. I'm sorry. I was listening to what Chair Mitchell was saying.
No problem. So I think that what I would probably suggest, Jeff, is can you guys pull together something that is broader and it gives us a real good overview of the landscape as it relates to the financing, where we're going to have opportunities. I think Colin used I thought what Colin was saying was we may be able to be creative as a commission going forward on some things that allow us to strike when the iron's hot. So can you wrap all that into a workshop and come back and wow us?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Can I? No. Can Colin and Emily? Yes.
Emily's like, absolutely. Okay. So we'll wrap 106 into that discussion, Emily, and Colin and Jeff, and I think that we will all benefit because it will also maybe drive some thoughts by others who are listening to that workshop as well. So, Commissioner Hester, it's your birthday, by the way. Did congratulations, and maybe that was, but again, it's your birthday, so you. we will
Oh
give-
my gosh, seriously, it's just, I had to, wait till you're done. So I forgot.
Okay, with that plan, if there's an agreement that we'll have a multi-pronged workshop on financing and at all preservation. That at the next meeting, then I think that brings us, there's no action required on the end of the discussion about prevention. So with that, I will ask the question on the I guess I would ask there's Chuck, I think since we're going to move the next workshop into a broader one, there's no action required. We don't have to vote on that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so with that, then I will ask the commissioners, are there any further comments related to the current agenda in this meeting? We have an action plan for the next meeting that I think will be incredibly helpful and valuable for everyone. So if there are any further comments or questions, if not, then we will the board will be meeting in closed session this morning to discuss an item. Members of the public who wish to speak on the item on the closed session agenda should press *9 on their phones to raise their hand. No written public comments were submitted for today's closed session. Mr. Christensen, would you please announce the closed session agenda for this morning?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Housing Commission will now meet in closed session to discuss its closed session agenda as noted on the published agenda for this meeting. At the end of that meeting, the Housing Commission will reconvene in open session, and the results of that closed session will be stated by council.
Okay, we will now take any public comments from callers about the closed session agenda.
We do not have any callers about closed session. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott Marshall. This concludes the public comment period for closed session. After the closed session, the board will reconvene in open session, and General Counsel Chuck Christensen will announce actions taken during the closed session. And we will now move into the closed session. And we will Wonderful. This is Mitch Mitchell, Chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. The board has just concluded its closed session, is reconvening an open session at 10:54 a.m. Housing Commission General Counsel Chuck Christensen will now announce the actions that the board took in closed session. Chuck, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The Housing Commission met in closed session, and the matter discussed was informational only. There was no vote taken in connection with the matter. That concludes the matters that were discussed in closed session.
Thank you very much, Chuck Christensen. Therefore, this concludes the board's special meeting today. Thank you to my fellow commissioners for a very robust and important conversation. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you very much to the entire San Diego Housing Commission team. This work that you are doing every day is important to not just individuals but families, but to the city of San Diego, and your leadership is appreciated. So with that, we will adjourn this meeting at 10:55 a.m. Everyone, please stay safe, and I will see you at our next meeting for a conversation on an informational workshop on financing. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.
Happy holidays.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Take care.